Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Malcolm, the CEO of Alva Labs. Malcolm, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Great to be here and looking forward to our chat.
It's my pleasure, and I really enjoy your journey. So you have been almost in all sides of the table as an entrepreneur, as an investor, and but for the ones who don't know you yet, and that will have a huge pleasure listening to this podcast. So no pressure. Who is Malcolm?
Who is Malcolm? Yeah, the short or medium long story, I guess. So yeah, my name is Malcolm. I'm founder and CEO of Alva Labs. I'm except for Alva, father of 2 small children. Ted just turned 4 years old, and Aline 15 months. So it's it's a handful on both ends of life at the moment. And my wife Lippa, and we live in Stockholm, Sweden, where I'm born and raised. And that's also where Alva HQ is and the majority of our employees at the moment. And yeah, quick background on me. So I guess I've been more or less like pulled into startups or like early stage ever since university. So I studied Stockholm School of Economics, a major in economics and accounting, and was always sort of excited about building. So I actually started my first company during university, at the time, small booking platform for events and conferences, and spent most of my time in the sort of university incubator, which was the best experience, I think, from my university years, which also is reflected in my grades. So don't ask about those. Yeah, that was really like a super exciting peek into entrepreneurship and the startups. I guess my experience from those 2 years was that, you know, really exciting. And I think I felt at home building, but I wasn't necessarily like super passionate about the problem space. It was more driven from, you know, let's start a company, write a few ideas on a whiteboard and pick the least bad one and go. Where I think that's, you know, everything is individual, but for me, I think the sort of intrinsic motivation in the problem space is quite important. And that's why I'm like extra excited about Alva. And then I had a bit back and forth, spent a few months in investment banking in London, but then back again to startups and joined a small e-commerce company at the time called Furniture Box. So we were competing with IKEA in the sort of mass market furniture segment, but only online. And this is 2013. So it was quite a ripe market for sort of online, where I think we had a really exciting 2 to 3 years of fast growth, going from 1 million to 30 million in sales without any external funding. So which was quite unique for
the kind of the same space of made.com in London.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Exactly. So that would be the equivalent or the closest peer, I think. Yeah. That company was really by many measures like a great success, but the biggest challenge we had and I had was really building and sort of scaling that team from, I think we were about 5-6 people when I joined, and then about 70 when I left 2.5 years later. And I think, yeah, all the domains of HR and building an organization was challenging, but really this notion of like the revolving doors, if you will, where we had to constantly like fix our mistakes. And I think we were really struggling to understand what we were looking for and ultimately how to then evaluate candidates against something quite abstract. And we were, you know, randomly picking CVs, sitting in interviews, talking about hobbies. Someone played tennis, which I also do. So that was a great signal.
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, sometimes it worked out and it was great, but quite often it didn't. And I think that was really like a toll on company performance, but also really culture. So then after 2.5, 3 years with Furniture Box, I, as you said, went on to join the other side of the table. So I joined EQT, the Nordic private equity, but also now venture fund, and had a few different roles. But my main focus was part of setting up EQT Ventures and then joining as the first employee in the investment team. I spent about 2 years in the investment team, looking for and meeting great founders.
The first investments of that firm, and I really enjoyed the approach. They've invested all across Europe, right? It's not
exactly
in the Nordics.
Pan-European multi-stage from A and later, and also doing some seed as well, which was really a super exciting experience as well. But I think after 3 years, I also felt the urge to go back and be operational. And it was at EQT, I also met my two co-founders, Björn and Peter. For me, the problem space the problem I felt at Furniture Box was really something that sort of stuck with me, and I also felt was more of a systemic challenge rather than just a Malcolm specific challenge at Furniture Box. And that's really where we thought that, hey, this is a huge problem not solved yet. And all the companies that we were working with at EQT, were facing the same challenges. How do we identify and hire great people and limit mistakes, but really trying to optimize for finding those like golden nuggets, right? And Absolutely. That really has the biggest impact on sort of the long-term success of the company. So yeah, that's now 4.5 years ago, and now we're here at Alva.
Congratulations, that's really a great story. And for the ones who are considering to also do the move to starting up their own companies, how was the process of finding your two co-founders, and what has been kind of the criteria or the traits that you have tried to build the founding team around, let's say?
Right. So great question. So that was quite a natural process, because it was like we were colleagues first. We got to know each other quite well. We were and are quite complementary in skills and what we like and want to do. So that's like a natural fit, I think, from the start. But then really I think about, like, yes, we were the official founders, but there's really this larger core team who joined, let's say, the first year, maybe even first 18, 24 months, which really constitutes like the full sort of spectrum of skills and traits and experiences that has been instrumental to getting this off the ground, but also to the place we're at now. And that's been, building the puzzle piece by piece, step by step.
Definitely those initial 10 members of the team, as we always say, are really, really critical. And it's good to do it very well, because later on we will pay or benefit from those decisions, right?
Absolutely. I think maybe that's the most important decisions you make, getting those 5 first 10 hires right, which we luckily did, and all of them are still here at Alva, which is like really exciting, and core team members still.
It's awesome. And what are the roles of your other two co-founders?
So we're out of 3 co-founders. We're still 2 operational in the company. So Björn, who's our CTO and head of analytics, he was working at EQT Ventures in the Motherbrain team, EQT's own AI to detect and identify the next big thing. So yeah, that's like really a complementary, obviously, to me as more of the sales guy, if you will. And Peter, more of a sort of marketing and growth background. And then in the sort of wider team, like a key competency for Alva as a product and as a team is really the part of the sort of research-based and scientific approach to the product we build. So Morgan and Kaisa, 2 of the sort of leading psychometricians and data scientists in this field, which like were instrumental to getting holistic sort of skill set in place.
Which is nice. So in the free co-founders, you didn't have the technical co-founder, right? Or just in the early employees.
Yeah, exactly. So that was like, that's been key. I think that Björn is founding CTO and head of analytics now, to really make sure that you have you can get to MVP in the founding team.
So you had that founding CTO. So
yes, exactly.
I didn't get it, and then you had another founder which was much more on the sales and marketing background, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's come back into Alva, and what is your long-term vision and a little bit the dream of Alva for you?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the overarching mission at Alva is really to create a fair and efficient job market for all. And I think what we're seeing today is that companies really of all sizes, from the startup looking to hire their first employees to the scale-ups, but also the larger enterprises, are really struggling to find and identify great talent, right? Like many companies are really experiencing like a hiring crisis. And I think there's a few like bigger macro trends playing into this. Like one, the bull market or the heydays we've seen in the last 5, 10, maybe even 15 years, has brought more companies than ever are going through sort of hyper growth and competing really for talent in a much more fierce way than ever before. And adding, remote work to that, talent is global, opportunity is global. And a candidate can pick any job essentially on the planet, which has like completely changed the playing field. So really a fierce competition. And then at the same time, this notion of, the rise of the generalist and the downfall of the diploma, where there's really lots of new roles that didn't even exist 5, 10 years ago. Just looking at our org chart, like quite a few roles that I didn't know existed when I was back at university, right? And roles are really changing rapidly. So the old like list of criterias on hard skills and experiences are becoming much, much more blurry. And there's even one of the big banks here in the Nordics came out and said that they predict that 50% of the jobs in the banking industry will not exist in 5, 10 years. So half their staff needs to like essentially retrain and work on new things, right? So that the problem of hiring is really becoming much, much harder. Like how do you spot performance or long-term performance when the hard skills, the things that were stable for so long are now changing. So the assessment and sort of description of the role is much, much harder. And then really the flip that candidates really possess the power in the hiring process, right? The talent is everywhere. We're experiencing the great resignation in the UK and really in the US, but I'd say across Europe as well. So that's one part of it, but we're still also seeing, big parts of the talent pool who are really underserved and to be frank, like discriminated against, right? And the list goes on with really bleak and sad stats. Women need 30% more applications to get the same hit rate, non-Caucasians 50%, and the list goes on. So what this tells us really is, again, to our mission, right, to make a fair and efficient job market. The current job and talent market is really inefficient and largely broken. We're all fishing in the same pond, stuck in the ways of working, trying to, stick to that old template of criteria that we thought we needed, right? So that's really the long-term vision for Alva is how do we level the playing field and ultimately enable every candidate to have the same opportunity, and for companies to really identify and spot like long-term potential And that's one of the most exciting things, I think, with this problem space, but also with Alva, is this notion of hitting two birds with one stone. There's no trade-off between like hiring for performance or doing the right thing from a more like D&I perspective or social aspect. Like if you evaluate candidates on a fair and objective way, you will ultimately create a fair process, level the playing field, but also optimize for success and performance. And that's really the long-term vision to make that happen at scale globally.
Great mission and vision, and the way you articulate it, it seems easier than it is, right? To describe well what is the problem, what is the movement, what we're trying to solve, and at the same time explaining what is the plan in the long term to solve that huge problem that you are attacking. You have raised a Series A round, $13.3 million A round at the end of January. So what looks like the midterm for you in terms of success? So getting, for instance, into Series B, what do you need to prove?
Right. I think that a big theme for us is expanding geographically to new markets. So we're still like majority of the business we do is Nordic based. So a big theme for the coming year and years really is like European expansion, where UK is one of the big steps we're taking now, but later this year we'll enter in more officially to a few more markets as well. So that for sure is one of the big themes. The tons of things we want to do on the product side as well. It feels like we've just scratched the surface on to your point, right? Solving that grander mission for the long term.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's really important to have clear this vision reverse engineering narrative exercise. That's the way I call it.
Right.
But for the ones who are listening, it's really thinking about your long-term vision first, the way we'll solve your problem, and then coming into the present, stopping at the midterm, and then it's the short term, which is typically almost the next round in VC. And
exactly.
Defining the milestones of the narrative in a very articulated way, so everyone can feel and can participate in the construction of that narrative, right?
Exactly.
In terms of ICP, so as you discussed, this is a huge problem that almost every single company in the planet is facing at the moment, from small businesses into mid-sized businesses into enterprise businesses, also the VC-backed ones that you have talked about, the hypergrowth. So how are you cascading and attacking this amazing potential in terms of TAM and ICP? But how did you find your niche? And how do you keep expanding niche after niche to attack that TAM? Right?
Great question. I think that's honestly been one of the big challenges for us, because to your point, right, any company looking to hire even one person the next coming year is a potential user of Alva, which on one hand is like exciting from a TAM perspective, but it's not super helpful from a go-to-market perspective, right? So that's a great point. And how we're thinking about it now, like today we have customers from the small 5-man startup looking to do their first hires, up to the large enterprises, a few of the bigger banks in the Nordics, telcos, trucking companies, Scania, etc. But really the sweet spot for us, the ICP, is the fast growing like SME mid-market company, typically a startup scale up in Alva's phase or later. That's really where we see the best fit today, and where we can really come in and create a lot of value. And looking at our customer list today and the companies we work with, there's a good portion of the Nordic scale-ups that we're super happy and excited to work with, like companies like Northvolt, Daniel Wellington, Fodora, Anyfin, to name a few. Right. So that's the segment we're focusing on the most in all markets.
I need to ask this question about geographical expansion because every single founder and CEO thinks about this. Should we compete and go into the US or own the European markets? I would say in fewer cases, there is also the consideration of Asia. It's becoming more and more popular, but still the US keeps being the most interesting and or appealing markets. If we go into Spain, LATAM is becoming also a field of great success for Spanish scale-ups. But what is your view on conquering a region or trying to go directly to the US, considering other regions to scale? And maybe that's not yet the short or even mid, but in the long term, how is your thought process? I know that this is always changing. We are learning and getting feedback from the market, so we never know all the answers.
Oh, exactly.
But where are you at the moment?
That's a great question, and then that's exactly where I am. It's changing, and we're constantly evaluating where we also have the best potential sort of product market fit and sort of sequencing the markets we go after based on that to a large extent. I think the US is obviously a super exciting market for many reasons. But if I had to choose today and decide, US is not the key market in the coming 1-2 years, but that can change. So we're currently looking more at the European region, and if anything, maybe Asia actually, and LATAM are really exciting for our product. But we're also, to be honest, in the phase of really mapping that out. The short term is much clearer for us, and then I think there's still some quite unanswered questions on the sequencing and the trade-offs on that. But it's not a given that the US is the top priority in the coming 1-2 years.
And to remove bias here, I always talk about Asia and LATAM on the show, but I know that there are a lot of exciting things also happening in Africa, and I think that including myself, we will need to be a little bit more educated about opportunities in the African continent.
For sure. For sure.
Especially operators from the Nordics as well are very close connected to some funds are operating there, and also we see the UK, for instance, the Founders Factory from Brent Oberman also playing a role over there. So I see some potential in the future. Maybe the most exciting regions now are more Southeast Asia and more recently LATAM, because of course India and China are continents themselves and really difficult to compete there. And other markets are not as big and also very complicated, like South Korea and Japan, and then the typical ones that usually scale-ups approach, Australia and New Zealand, which are a little bit more friendly, but at the same time, the size of those markets might not compensate even the time zone issues, right? So that's also a consideration to make. So you have described very well this huge problem that we are facing, the Great Resignation that we see with more emphasis in the UK and in the US, but it's happening all over. And some of the listeners are losing, okay, we all understand the problem, but what can we do about it?
Right. Well, I think great. Good to be more practical. I think that the key thing here really is to emphasize and look for and try to identify this notion, which is referred to, which we talk about a lot with our customers and really what the product is all about. Put long-term potential. right? And in research, you talk about potential versus readiness, where readiness is really, can you do the job tomorrow because you've done X, Y, Z just now before in your previous role, versus potential, like, do you have the traits, the intrinsic sort of motivation, the capabilities, the way you learn new things, go about problem solving, etc. That really speaks to the long-term potential in that specific role or any role, essentially. So who are you as a person, more than exactly have you done X, Y, Z. And by emphasizing that, you can really widening the talent pool, right? Mm-hmm. So you won't need to limit yourself to say, I only going to interview people who've been at XYZ logos before, or went to, XYZ university, or have had this exact role before. But you can rather say, I'm looking for this kind of capabilities and this type of person, this individual with this sort of fundamental traits to take on that challenge. And by that, you're really opening up the top of funnel, essentially. And then the question is, how do you then go from this hopefully large top of funnel in an objective, structured way, and measuring and evaluating candidates based on this potential? And that's where Alva comes in, right? We're helping you to assess like personality and cognitive assessments and cognitive ability. Which then speaks to that. And then obviously like experience and other more readiness-esque criteria are important, but the later in the hiring process you can wait with assessing those, you'll end up with a much more diverse and interesting really candidate pipeline where you'll see that there's great talent everywhere. You just need to look. And that's what we do, and that's ultimately what we believe is also one of the best approaches to sort of attack this problem space with.
Right. It's curious because it seems that we have kind of two opposite forces, right? So one is we need to get to know more about the candidate because it's much less about the resume and much more about what are the traits that the candidate has and how quickly that candidate can learn and can make an impact in the organization. Because what we know for sure, especially in your ICP, is that the responsibilities are changing quite quickly because a company of 50 people, 100 people, 150 people, or 300 people is completely different, and the skills needed are completely different, even the style of leadership and the style of the individual contributors, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, we need to be quite quick to make decisions. So we need more time to get to know people. And at the same time, we have less time to make a decision because those people are also being approached by other players in the market and might also be pissed off if the process is too long or if there is no clarity on what are the steps of the process, right?
Exactly. Great point. And I think it's, most the general insight we have from starting to work with companies of all sizes is really, you can probably reduce or take away half of the interview steps, like have clear intent in every activity across the hiring process. It will depend on what type of role it is, how competitive that specific skill set or competency is. And thus like designing that hiring process with super clear intent in every step and making sure that like measure what matters and then really try to be structured and objective on the things that that technology can solve for, and then as humans spend time on the things that we actually do really well, and that's like late stage get to know the candidate.
In a nutshell, is really providing a great experience with the product, both to the candidate and to the recruiter, right? So
exactly,
making the tools available for that process to be much easier and having in consideration kind of what are the most important steps of the process. And the good thing that I see also on your product is that then you will have a customer base and you will start seeing some patterns and some data that might be relevant to improve the process in the future, right?
Exactly. And that's really one of the long-term sort of holy grails. How can we learn and improve on a role basis, company basis across, and really take a big leap on what today is more of sort of the research-based foundation, but becoming more sort of deep in insightful to maybe company-specific insights as well.
That's awesome. Any tips on defining a good strategy in order to be also appealing to attract talent? So I think, and I would say not only a talent acquisition, but also a talent retention strategy, because I think that there is nothing worse than being able to attract but not being able to retain, as we talk about SaaS and the customer side. If you don't have your retention engine fixed, it doesn't matter to attack more the acquisition engine. So please fix your retention engine first, and then speed up the acquisition engine. But something is not right if people are not staying with the company, are not consuming more of the product, let's say, in other words.
Exactly. Oh, and I think we've been lucky so far to have like really strong employee retention, and you really see that like the magic that happens year 2, 3, 4 when someone's with your company.
Right.
And I mean same with SaaS, right? It's unit economics are great year 2, 3, 4, 5 and beyond, right? Exactly. And I think what we've tried to do is really emphasize culture. And making sure that it's a place where people like are constantly challenged, like just the right amount of challenge, right? But that's always like super tricky, obviously, to not go beyond to like negative stress and pressure, but at the same time making sure it's like super exciting and challenging. So focus on culture, and I think we try to really live and breathe what our product ultimately stands for, right? To build a great and diverse and inclusive work environment. And I think on your question on attraction, I think one key thing actually like super simple is like go and look at your job ads and try to look at a list of criteria for a specific job and slice it with 50%, maybe remove everything. Like really think about your ad and the way you talk about the roles and opportunities as a top of funnel exercise. Anyone should be excited about applying, and then you need to figure out how you sort of handle that process effectively on the inside rather, because there's this one study which is quite interesting where this company had 10 criteria on you need to do X, Y, Z, you need to have 5 years experience of Y. Ultimately that talent pool that fits that list is like close to zero. You need a 22-year-old PhD who's also done X and been a leader for 5 years like that.
And you scare a lot of candidates because of that, right? So
exactly.
Say I'm not a good fit for this. I will search another place.
Exactly, and you'll also see that on a gender basis, like women, if women read that list and don't feel that they fit 9 out of 10 criteria, they won't apply. Whereas men find one criteria that they feel they fit and they will apply. So I think you're really harming your funnel already without knowing on the way you talk about your company, but also the roles that you're looking to hire for.
Interesting.
So really be intentful across the funnel and try to look for potential and speak about potential. I think that's one of the stronger employee branding exercises to be done.
And you are right. In the same way that we study the website of a company as a customer, it's a good thing to study the website and the job ads, or going into the LinkedIn and seeing the way the company writes down the job ads to get a feeling about the culture. All those things communicate a lot. So thinking about that strategically, it's really important. It's kind of the same of the copy, right? We invest so much time on making sure that we have that narrative, as we were discussing in the beginning, for the customer. And finally, we are getting into a moment that we are also investing a lot on the copy to attract the talent that will serve the customer, and it's becoming a marketplace where as CEOs we need to serve both the customer, both the talent at the same. If not, the marketplace doesn't work. Exactly. Let's jump into your fundraising lessons. We will need to start to be brief because we have so many topics to discuss here, and it's such a nice conversation. But during the different stages, and maybe let's start with the initial stages of fundraising and the previous one. What have been some of your lessons in the beginning of the company at pre-seed and seed stage compared to your Series A that you have raised in January?
Right. So I think first foremost, we're yet early on our journey. So I can't speak for any truths, but only like my experiences. And I think exactly. My experience is like one key learning, I think I didn't really appreciate, even though I was on a VC before, was this notion of that, all these different rounds and stages, the pre-seed, seed, Series A, etc., are not necessarily like step-by-step sequences that necessarily happen in a timely manner and after each other and
12 18 months and that's it. So exactly. If you are not there, stop.
Exactly. And I think that the overall sort of narrative, when you like read on Twitter, people are killing it right, left and center. Everything seems so clear and like a straight line from inception to IPO, whereas my experience is much more like, especially maybe the seed stage, much more of a phase, which can be 3 months, but it can also easily be 3 years. So it's about like understanding, I think, as a founder, where are you and what proof points have you shown and what are you missing, and not going too fast too soon and thinking that you're now on the journey to get to your Series A, for instance, without actually having the proof points, for investors, but really also for yourself, that is your company a seed stage company or not. And maybe now if like sentiments, macro and like the investment climate changes from the heydays we've been in, I think that's going to be even more important, and something I'm thinking quite a lot about. Make sure that you have the suit that is fit for the stage and phase that you're in, and not too soon.
As a founder, do you think that what is happening, of course, in Ukraine will be really affecting we are seeing that the first quarter already has not been as hot as the previous quarters in terms of investment rounds. But do you think that this will have an impact and that founders should prepare, or we still need to wait a little bit more to see?
I think $1 million question, and I have no answers. But I think just how I'm thinking about this is that I'm getting ready and getting my team ready for a quite different scenario than we've been in before. And I think Ukraine is one macro event, but I think we also already saw like a tech sell-off earlier, like late last year. And, high inflation, rising interest rates. Right. I think the investment climate will probably look quite different. So it's better to be here on the side of caution, if you will, and be prepared for that.
Good point. Sometimes we forget with this nightmare that is happening, that inflation was already there before it starts. Good point. And of course, also the effect of the pandemic that demanded a lot of investment in the economy without a structure or some fundamentals behind it.
Exactly. Like, are we bouncing back to what we had 2020 or 2021, or are we now rather like reversing to the 5-year, 10-year mean, where the COVID phase was more of an outlier on the upside, and we won't see that level again of activity and valuations. Like I don't know, but it's worth thinking about, I think.
Or in other words, that's what you were saying. Some of the rounds are being raised don't fit into the criteria that the round doesn't fit the stage, as you were saying. Right. So the company is raising a round, but might not have the criteria on the playbook to raise a round. So they might be much more a seed stage company, not a stage company, even if the company has raised the A round.
Exactly.
The difficult part there is if in the next investment round, the process is much more strict into the metrics, we'll need to make two stages instead of one. So we'll need to do what we didn't do at the seed stage. And now we need to do also what we did to do at the A stage. So we might, instead of 12 to 18 months, we might need 36 months. And this will create huge pressure in terms of runaway and the way we manage and we know it's never a good moment to be in that situation that we need to start cutting costs and extending the runaway, because in this kind of companies, we also want to play to win and not play to not lose, right?
Yes, exactly. Great point. Yeah. So I completely agree.
Any other final reflections before we move into the wrap-up segment of the show?
I think we've
covered
things well. Nothing that I can think about now.
I like the muscles that founders and CEOs, and I would say even key executives need to develop, right? So we have covered a little bit on ICP, the geographical expansion, a little bit the strategy muscle that is also really connected with the revenue muscle, because I think that strategy, especially at these stages, is really about creating that repeatable, profitable, and scalable revenue machine. And this needs to be made together, and also a lot of team skills.
Yeah.
Then we discussed it a lot, of course, here, recruitment. I think that's one of the most important muscles at the moment for any founder. And finally, fundraising, ensuring that there are always cash on the bank account, so we can keep moving
the lights on.
So I think that we kind of covered the main muscles that founder, CEO, and even key executive needs to have, because I also believe that a great VP could be the CEO, but chooses to have a special domain that person loves, and it might be marketing or sales or product or whatever it is. But everyone in the leadership team should think as a CEO, and we see that those executives need to have very strong muscles in terms of hiring as well.
For sure,
nowadays. Cool. So if you would have a coffee with Malcolm at the beginning of this journey at Alva Labs, what advice would you offer to that Malcolm that is now thinking, I will jump out of the VC seat and I will become an operator again, and I have this big dream to start Alva, but what I'm not able to see yet?
Right. A great question. I think there's many things, but like one thing is like the classic, start small. Don't build a too broad of a product, like go super, super niched. Even it's like, I think it's famous by Paul Graham quote, right? Like even if it's like 5 people that have your problem that you can solve well, like make sure you do that first and then you can expand. I think that's the easy mistake in the beginning, that you're like trying to please too many potential customers. So that's one key learning. Then the other one I think is like take it easy and don't look too much at what others are doing or what you think you should be doing because someone, some oracle on Twitter said so. Like, do your thing, get the basics right, focus on your customers, build a strong team, keep improving the product. It's quite easy, I think. I guess it's a personality trait as well, but quite easy to get caught up in what others are doing or saying you should do. And some obviously are great advice, and you can learn a lot, but it's easy to get caught up in that and get stressed out, right? And I think take it easy, talk to customers and build a good product. That's a good start.
I've been writing down your reflections. I think that they are really, really great. And it's really about ensuring that first things first, right? This is really important. And sometimes we assume, especially when the space is new, that if the competitors are doing something or the players are doing something in that area that we are playing, it is right and it is working very well. So we should follow what they are doing. And sometimes that's not true. It's not working at all. They are just doing an attempt of making it work, but it doesn't mean that it's working.
Yeah, exactly. You do your thing. It needs to be authentic. And I think that's a good start.
What are you the most proud of so far with Alva?
I think the thing I'm most proud of is really now, 4.5 years in, the impact that we're having on now how like hundreds of companies of various sizes are to some extent like really rethinking the way they do hiring. For some, it's been a long journey. For some, it came easier. And how the sort of downstream effect of that now that we're at some kind of scale, hundreds of thousands of candidates are now, objectively and fairly assessed. And the way they also, which is maybe what I'm most happy about, is really how candidates are really engaged and happy and appreciate the product experience, but also what that leads to and what that means for them as candidates in a given hiring process. So that's I think what I'm most proud of so far.
It's worst advice ever received.
I actually don't know, it's super clear, but I think I got some advice early on, like go big or go home, which I think is like not always true for founders and employees. I think that speaks to something that might be like misaligned incentives sometimes between investors and founders and employees. Like bet everything on red might work for the fund economics for a big fund, but for the team hustling 24/7, it maybe not the right move, right? So I think that probably, but I haven't gotten that much bad advice, so I think
that's good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, favorite book?
Like I quite recently read Ray Dalio's recent book on the changing world order, why nations succeed and fail, which I think was really interesting and also quite timely given current events and to our discussion earlier on like how to think about and prepare for like a changing fundraising climate. I think there's a lot going on, which is super complex, and like the more you think about it, the more you're confused to some extent. But I think it's quite important to think about that because it's quite high probability, I think, that the coming 5-10 years will be quite different to the previous 10 years and how to sort of prepare for that.
And this is exactly a good book because as a CEO, we need to be able to read how the wind is changing so we can adapt the boat in the right direction, right?
Exactly.
Favorite movie or series?
I think Game of Thrones.
Got it. For any reason?
It's just like really good. I think that's one of the few ones that I've been first minute it's live. I've been watching it every week. So,
and finally, favorite podcast excluding Scaleup Valley.
I think if I had to choose one, I think Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
Okay. What is that podcast about?
It's like a long form, often monologue on like an historic event, typically with I believe it's a professor of history, like really nice. engaging and exciting and insightful. And it's like a bunch of different long form series that he's done. And like there's one actually conversation he has with Elon Musk, which I think is really good, which I recommend on like, I believe the episode was Engineering Victory, where they talk about the impact of historic outcomes due to engineering essentially and innovation, and how that sort of impacted wars and the path of history. Good show.
Right. People can go back when they are listening to the podcast, but what is the name of the podcast again?
Hardcore History with Dan Carvey.
History. Got it. Awesome. That's a great one. Always learning a lot from these questions. Yeah. Thanks to Alex, our podcast producer, who challenged me to add these questions to get to know more about the guests, and I'm learning so much about it.
That's great.
So much inspiration from this. Malcolm, thanks so much for making the time. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks a lot. Really enjoyed it.
And to our community, we keep bringing you the best of the best to make your life a little bit easier. Not easy, but also very funny. So see you soon and keep scaling.